skip the whole next slide because it's just listed examples of what secondary sources are. That way we can move on to our crack test. I think first we're going to talk about peer reviewed. Okay, what is a publication? We learned the difference between a newspaper and a magazine. What's the difference between the author and a publisher? The author and the publisher. Anybody can explain it? ER.
The author is like the one that writes it, and like the publisher is the one that like makes sure that everything's good, and then like.
That's actually the editor. So I'm glad you brought that up. The editor. You have the author, the editor. The editor works for a publishing company though, so you're very close. Let's go over here to. Oh my gosh. I will remember Liziah. Okay, I was like Ryan. No.
Like someone that, like, let's just say you're talking about a book, an author is someone that wrote the book, but a publisher is like someone that releases it for you.
Yeah. So mass prints it. Do you want to add something?
Or it can be like during with media, the author would be the one who wrote the material. The publisher would be like the overarching organization that publishes it on their, like, this is my product.
Yes, on their platform. So let's switch gears to like movies because we all know about movies, right? What is it called? The film company like Sony Pictures or Warner Brothers or let's say what is another Paramount. Universal Pictures. These, what are those called? I don't know in movies, but that would be like the movie publisher. Like to make an analogy here. Those would be like the publisher. Don't each of them, those film organizations, kind of have themes and like reputations to live by? Right? Like Sony Pictures has Spider-Man. You know, Lucasfilms has Star Wars. And they have kind of like reputations and they feel like different niches of film themes.
Almost like their magazine.
So, yes, so like different magazine publishers have different themes. Now, a big part of publishers is these themes that they hold and also what they produce, who they host, and how they decide what to publish, right? It's big. It's a big organization and they make these decisions. I'm about to teach you something new right now. Those tier ones, the scholarly, peer-reviewed, academic type stuff, there's publishers for them too. And they all have different reputations and themes and very strict policies on what gets added. Now, some of them require that peer review process I told you about. Some don't. Okay? For the sake of the class, all of them will be tier ones, academic and peer-reviewed academic stuff. But it's important for you to know which magazines require the peer review process. Now, remember for our fallacy thing, when we talked about the 1992 journal article by Wakefield that linked the MMR vaccine to autism, and I told you that little story about how it was in the Lancet, which is a very reputable academic publisher, and they have a very strict peer review process. And it still failed. It was still redacted. Okay? So even at the very, very top, the most prestigious publishers can make mistakes. There can be corruption. Editors can be friends with authors. Wakefield had gained a lot of notoriety before he made that mistake. So he was already a trusted name within the Lancet, and then he made that huge, and it looks like it was totally on purpose, right? Like he just lied. And then it was discovered, what was it, like 12 years later it took to finally redact the article. Something like 8 or 12, I can't remember. But it took that long to redact something that we already had fought through the peer review process. So that's why I tell you, always kind of be doubtful. With these tier ones, with these scholarly things, something that you can analyze right away is sample size. So if a study, no matter how fancy the publisher, only has 10 people as a study sample, that should raise a red flag. Why? Yes.
Because that body is representative of the whole.
Exactly. Unfortunately, a lot of medical studies, especially with new medicines, tend to have small samples. Okay? So you need to look to see, is this a new innovative medicine? Or is it something older? Is this a retrospective study looking at the past? Okay, I will slowly teach you all this stuff. So if it's a study looking in the past, you could arguably include a lot of people. If it's something really, really new, it's hard to gain people into your study because nobody wants to be like, yay, I want to try this new medicine that might kill me. Enroll me now, right? So it's difficult.
That's what they pay the money.
But still, I'm not going to take any amount of money to try a new medication, right? Like any new medication has inherent risks, so it's harder to gain people, right? So you need, as a researcher, you need to analyze these things. Okay? Go ahead, go next.
Uh-oh.
Here's my crap test.
No.
One more for the purpose. Okay, so crap test, like I said, is going to be a checklist and a ranking to help put things into tiers, sources into tiers. And CRAP is an acronym that stands for currency, relevance, authority, accuracy, and purpose. We're gonna go over each one and then I'm done talking for today. Let's go to currency, please. Thank you, Herlander. Okay, currency, although that sounds like money, it stands for timeliness. Had to make the CRAP acronym work, so I said currency. I didn't make this up though, even though I like to be credited with it. Currency stands for dates. Dates, dates, dates. If you're doing a historical type of research project, you can go back in time, far, far back in time, especially if you're doing something on the Reconstruction era, or the Civil War, or Mesopotamians, right? You can go back in time. Now, if you're doing something with science, the rule of thumb is nothing later than 5 years old. Why? Because science advances so quickly. If you're doing any other subject, the rule of thumb is nothing later than 10 years old. Okay? So if you're doing something about the education system, and you show me a resource that was published in 1967, what is Ms. Reyes going to say? No. Go next, please. It'll rank low in currency, right? It'll rate it from 1 to 10. It'll probably get a 0 for currency.
What if you're taking like as an example?
Then if you still, okay, so then you go through the CRAP test. If it has a strong relevance, a strong
So
purpose,
it can fail
strong
one.
authority, yes, it can fail one, and if you can defend the others, then you can have it. So that's the whole point of kind of going through.
I was thinking like in the education example, let's say it's a study from the 80s that showed how a good classroom should be structured.
And that was an iconic study that the many other studies were based off of, and the dude was like famous and he revolutionized the education system. Yes. But if it doesn't do any of those other things, I'm gonna be like, why?
Not really.
Yeah, it's not relevant, it doesn't have purpose, right? It doesn't have those authority. We're gonna get to the piece that says authority. This one is relevant. How does this relate to your topic? Is it explaining something very iconic? Here's also a place, does it support your argument or is it against your argument? As a unbiased researcher, you need to balance all of your sources. You need to have stuff that's for and against. If you're doing an argumentative paper, you have to include the counter argument. So you need to make sure that you're looking for relevance that relates to both sides of the coin. Go next. Authority. This is ethos. This is about tiering. This is the source of credibility. So this is where you're going to go look who's the publisher, who's the author, who are the editors, how are they famous, where are they from, what's their background, what did they study, where did they go to high school, who are they married to, everything. You need to be a journalist and look up all of this stuff, okay? Because it can lead to interesting information. How many of you have noticed that on a source, the author will be listed and a mini biography will be there? Have you ever seen that? Like this was written by Jon Snow, leader of the North. I know, like something like that. Yeah, it's a reference. If a publisher is listing right away who, what, when, where, how, do you find that to be good or bad?
Pretty good.
What do they have to hide, right? They're proud of the author. They're showcasing the author. If you can't find the author, or if you can find very little about the author, written by Bob Graham, and then you Google Bob Graham, there's like 1,000 Bob Grahams, and you can't find the one that was like published that thing.
Why are there so many Bob Grahams?
Exactly, and then you're left to think like, which Bob Graham? And then you go to Twitter, you try to find a Bob Graham, but it's, you know, like some random person and like not a writer, right? That's more of a problem. The more transparent something is, the better. Sometimes you can't find the author because it's the organization. For example, the CDC or the MMWR report that I was talking about that the CDC publishes. Why can't you find the authors there? Because it's the whole organization, probably hundreds of people that went into that publication, right? So be wary. Never, like 0.002% of the time will you have no author. It will be the organization. So I will never want to see a reference that says NA. It's nothing, okay? Not in the sophisticated world of research, NA doesn't exist. If it's truly NA, you can't tier it. Don't have it, okay? URLs are important, but less important than you've been taught they are. So a .gov, yes, it's government. .edu, yes, it's education, but that doesn't mean automatically trust it. Are you going to trust something from Kaiser University or Harvard University? They both end in .edu, but trust Harvard. Don't trust Kaiser. Like it's a for-profit private school. It steals money from people. Okay? People can buy URLs. So there are like super white supremacist groups that have .org. There are websites like that. There are websites that are .org that are filled with just straight up lies and they're hoaxes, like the octopus that walks on land, or
What?
yeah, there's so .orgs you can buy, .nets you can buy. Here is an example of the peer review process. This is academic. This is peer review. So remember how I say some people use them synonymously, but peer review is a more reputable process, and some academic publications require it, some don't. How do you know? You just gotta look it up. Gotta look up the publisher. Next. Accuracy. This is where you go into the information and verify that it's okay. So if it's a tier 1, how big is the sample size? Why is it so small? Rule of thumb, sample size should be no less than 50. For significance testing, for statistical testing, 50 is the lowest number you can have to have a valuable statistic. 50. Some people argue that it can be 30. Ms. Reyes says it's 50. If it's less than 50, question it. Okay? If it's in the thousands, in the hundreds of thousands, that's awesome. But it's rare. What else? I know we can barely see this. This one, is the information or is the data verified by another source? Why is that important? Even if somebody cured cancer tomorrow and published the paper, right? That first paper might be the only thing that exists on that topic, but within a few hours, how many people are going to be talking about it?
3 million.
Hundreds. New York Times will be talking about it. The Washington Post will be talking about it. Everybody's going to be talking about it, right? If it's the only source that says what is being said, you doubt it, it'll rank low here. Trump had an affair with Hillary Clinton.
Oh.
And you can only find it in one source. It's probably a lie. If you can't verify it in another source, that's a problem. It might be spicy information, but it's probably a lie.
What were in those emails?
Okay, limitations. Limitations being discussed. Every tier 1 research should have a section where it's like, hey, we found this really cool stuff, but here are some things that we could never control. In any experiment, even your middle school science experiments, aren't there stuff that's out of your control, no matter how hard you try? In the super sciencey world, these are called confounding variables. They confound, they confuse, they will interfere. However, no matter how good the researcher is, they're hard to get rid of. But the researcher, being a responsible citizen, should discuss them in a section called discussion or limitations. If you don't see that, that's a problem. Tone, bias, and logic. This is your fallacy section. This is fallacies. Accuracy. Authority is ethos. And then now here we get into pathos and fallacies. Maybe if it's too emotional or if there's something wrong with the logic. Is there a false cause? Is there bad logos? Right? Things like that. Go next. We're almost done. This is it. Purpose. We're going to talk about lenses in another presentation. Is this fact, opinion, propaganda? What's the purpose of the article itself? Is it to inform? Is it to persuade? Is it to confuse? Is it to entertain? Right? It can be a piece of creative writing or something like that. And that's purpose. And that is your crap test, ladies and gentlemen. I wonder how this came out.